All right, guys, free to choose. Chapter 8, Who Protects the Worker? We're on the sub-chapter called Labor Unions. So Chapter 8 of Free to Choose, Who Protects the Worker? Labor Unions, and we're on the sub-chapter of the sub-chapter. This one called Who Benefits? Who benefits? Physicians are among the most highly paid workers in the United States. That status is not exceptional for persons who have benefited from labor unions. Despite the image often conveyed that labor unions protect low-paid workers against exploitation by employers, the reality is very different. The unions that have been most successful invariably cover workers who are in occupations that require skill and will be relatively highly paid with or without unions. These unions simply make high pay still higher. For example, airline pilots in the United States received an annual salary for a 3-day week that averaged $50,000 a year in 1976 and has risen considerably since. In a study entitled The Airline Pilots, George Hopkins writes, today's incredibly high pilot salaries result less from the responsibility pilots bear or the technical skill they possess than from the protected position they have achieved through a union. The oldest traditional unions in the United States are the craft unions, carpenters, plumbers, plasterers, and the like. Again, workers who are highly skilled and highly paid. More recently, the fastest growing unions, and indeed almost the only ones that have grown at all, are unions of government workers, including school teachers, policemen, sanitation workers, and every other variety of government employee. The municipal unions in New York City have demonstrated their strength by helping to bring that city to the verge of bankruptcy. School teachers and municipal employees illustrate a general principle that is clearly exemplified in Great Britain. Their unions do not deal directly with the taxpayers who pay their members' salaries. They deal with government officials. The looser, the connection between taxpayers and the officials the unions deal with, the greater the tendency for officials and the unions to gang up at the expense of the taxpayer. Another example of what happens when some people spend other people's money on still other people. That is why municipal unions are stronger in large cities such as New York than in small cities, why unions of school teachers have become more powerful as control over the conduct of schools and over educational expenditures have become more centralized, further removed from the local community. In Great Britain, the government has nationalized many more industries than in the United States, including coal mining, public utilities, telephones, hospitals. And labor unions in Britain have generally been strongest and labor problems most serious in the nationalized industries. The same principle is reflected in the strength of the U.S. postal unions. Given that members of strong unions are highly paid, the obvious question is, are they highly paid because their unions are strong, or are their unions strong because they are highly paid? Defenders of the unions claim that the high pay of their members is a tribute to the strength of union organization, and that if only all workers were members of unions, all workers would be highly paid. The situation is, however, much more complex. Unions of highly skilled workers have unquestionably been able to raise the wages of their members. However, people who would in any event be highly paid are in a favorable position to form strong unions. Moreover, the ability of unions to raise the wages of some workers does not mean that universal unionism could raise the wages of all workers. On the contrary, and this is a fundamental source of misunderstanding, the gains that strong unions win for their members are primarily at the expense of other workers. The key to understanding the situation is the most elementary principle of economics, the law of demand. The higher the price of anything, the less of it people will be willing to buy. Make labor of any kind more expensive, and the number of jobs of that kind will be fewer. Make carpenters more expensive, and fewer houses than otherwise will be built. And those houses that are built will tend to use materials and methods requiring less carpentry. Raise the wage of airline pilots, and air travel will become more expensive. Fewer people will fly, and there will be fewer jobs for airline pilots. Alternatively, Alternatively, reduce the number of carpenters or pilots and they will command higher wages. Keep down the number of physicians and they will be able to charge higher fees. Keep down, reduce the number, they will be able to charge higher wages. A successful union reduces the number of jobs available of the kind it controls. A successful union reduces the number of jobs available of the kind it controls. As a result, some people who would like to get such jobs at the union wage cannot do so. They are forced to look elsewhere. A greater supply of workers for other jobs drives down the wages paid for those jobs. Universal unionization will not alter the situation. It could mean higher wages for the persons who get jobs, along with more unemployment for others. More likely, it would mean strong unions and weak unions, with members of the strong unions getting higher wages as they do now at the expense of members of weak unions. Union leaders always talk about getting higher wages at the expense of profits. That is impossible. Profits simply aren't big enough. About 80% of the total national income of the United States currently goes to pay the wages, salaries, and fringe benefits of workers. More than half of the rest goes to pay rent and interest on loans. Corporate profits, which is what union leaders always point to, total less than 10% of national income. And that is before taxes. After taxes, corporate profits are something like 6% of the national income. That hardly provides much leeway to finance higher wages, even if all profits were absorbed. And that would kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. The small margin of profit provides the incentive for investment in factories and machines and for developing new products and methods. This investment, these innovations have over the years raised the productivity of the worker and provided the wherewithal for higher and higher wages. Higher wages to one group of workers must come primarily from others. Nearly 30 years ago, one of us estimated that on the verge of about 10 to 50% of the workers in this country had been able, through unions or their equivalent, no, higher wages to one group of workers must come primarily from other workers. Nearly 30 years ago, one of us estimated that on the average, about 10 to 15% of the workers in this country had been able, through unions or their equivalent, such as the American Medical Association, to raise their wages 10 to 50% above what they otherwise would have been, at the cost of reducing the wages earned by the other 85 to 90% by some 4% below what they otherwise would have been. More recent studies indicate that this remains roughly the order of magnitude of the effect of unions. Higher wages for high-paid workers, lower wages for low-paid workers. Higher wages for high-paid workers, lower wages for low-paid workers. All of us, including the highly unionized, have indirectly been harmed as consumers by the effect of high union wages on the prices of consumer goods. Houses are unnecessarily expensive for everyone, including the carpenters. Workers have been prevented by unions from using their skills to produce the most highly valued items. They have been forced to resort to activities where the productivity is less. The total basket of goods available to all of us is smaller than it would have been. So, who protects the worker? This one's called, what's it called? Labor unions. And this little subsection is called who benefits.